Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm gonna get to do some inking here on this double page spread, pages 24 and 25 of the Realm Ethereal, the Dream Awakens 4th issue. So I'm just gonna hop into this here and maybe talk a little bit about kind of like my inking here process. Since I'm doing this double page spread, I'm gonna kind of position this just a little bit lower on the drawing board here and kind of dive right into it. You know, one of the first things that I do is that I take my Kuretake brush pen here, kind of wake it up from its slumber. Like this scrap paper here, kind of bond paper, nothing fancy. And I just use that to just shake the pen and then kind of scribble just a bit. All right, so where should I put this? Move this out of the way. And I'm going to dive into the character here, this character Onu in Ethereal. One of the things that for my inking that I really like to kind of get out of the way and done is like the heavy bold areas on a figure. But first, what I'm going to do is start out with just kind of doing a basic outline of the figure itself here. So anywhere is good spot for me to hop in and start inking. So I'm just going to start here with his back, kind of like his lat area here, at least the lat area from the front view here. Kind of make this nice and thick, sweeping down into here. And what I do really is I kind of, like I said, I try to get really kind of bold and heavy with the inking here. So I'm gonna reposition this up just a little bit. Yeah, I'll move the board up for now. There you go. You can see a little bit of the thighs here, so his lower leg, hip area. And get this really defined and clear here. And I'm going to talk a little bit also about my inking, how I think it's pretty much has evolved throughout this series. I've seen, or rather, I've posted here on YouTube some of the footage that is like the capture coming out of Procreate, because this comic book series I initially started illustrating and started drawing it in Procreate on my iPad. And so when I look back at that artwork, it has definitely a different influence, and I've talked about it before. But long story short, just before I started drawing digitally, I discovered the work of Sergio Topi and saw his stuff and was just like super floored by his work. If you don't know who that is, you should look it up. You should look his work up. I mean, and just take a look at the pretty awesome rendering and drawing, and just the sheer the cross hatching and not just from a technical perspective, but also like his his imagination and what he did. But my introduction to him, to his work, was something like the Tales of the Arabian Nights or something like that. I'll make sure I put a link to it in the description here in this video. But the inking that I saw in that really influenced it's got me inspired, number one, to start inking and drawing. But again, I had just picked up this new device called an iPad. It was an iPad Pro, and God, this was well before COVID, so at least a year, maybe even 2 years before when I got the iPad, at least the version I have, which is like second generation. So it's old by the time this video comes out. It's way old generation. But I was using the iPad and Procreate, and getting a feel for how to draw on basically the glass surface, right, of the iPad, and then also getting used to the mechanics of the Apple Pencil, and then also becoming familiar with admittedly a different style of drawing, because I've used Photoshop and even like Corel Painter to illustrate on a Wacom tablet as far back as maybe 10 or 12 years ago. So I have that experience, but definitely I never used anything like a Cintiq, which is I think the equivalent, similar to drawing like right on the surface, right? So I've never used anything like that. So this was a totally new experience for me, and admittedly, what was one of the more appealing things was its portability and its ease of tools. What I mean by that is, the iPad Pro is a single tool, and then you add to that the peripherals or the accessories like the Apple Pencil to that, and then you really just have two pieces of hardware to manage. When we're doing stuff like this, we've got different pens and pencils and erasers, and just different sizes. And if you ink with a brush, let alone you've got a brush, and then you've got your ink, and then you've got to have your water, and then you got to have your towels and all that, and then you got to care for the brush, and you got to wash it and all that stuff, and then care for the brush properly to extend its life and get use out of it and make it so that you can use it. So that was the appeal of using the iPad Pro and Procreate, was just simply the ease with which I could just get a drawing started, boot up the program, almost no lag, no time for the computer to boot up, because it's an iPad, right? And then the application itself was very quick to start up. It never crashed. It hardly ever crashed on me. I can't remember a time when the iPad with Procreate has ever crashed. Maybe once or twice. So that's all appealing, right, from a technical perspective. But what was also alluring about using iPad Pro was I had access to all these different types of kind of like these built-in brushes, pens, whatever, these digital brushes. And I'm the kind of artist that is just way too lazy to try and make my own brushes like in Photoshop. I know that's been a thing for years. I just kind of rely on discovering artwork online, and then if that artist is savvy enough to create their own brushes and pens and then sell them or share them, that's just the route I would go. Otherwise, I would just kind of use the default brushes in these applications. And so that's how I would, that's why I was really excited with Procreate, because it was just chock full of different brushes and pens and effect brushes and pens. And that's what the appeal was initially, was I could create, tying it back, this look of Sergio Topi, the way he inked, and I just saw that, and that became almost like the driving motivation to get back into making my comic book, and then experiment with that inking in the iPad, because on the iPad in Procreate, because simply for the fact that, as with all things digital, for the most part, thanks to like our like programs like Corel Paint, or so why do I keep mentioning Corel Paint? Like, does anyone use that? Painter? I used it 12 years ago. I meant to say Photoshop. You can easily redo things, right? Command Z, baby. All these things are just super convenient when it comes to illustrating digitally, and so that's why I got super excited again about drawing. And so I felt like, hey, I can try to copy the style of inking of the Sergio Topi, and Procreate facilitated that quite easily. And so, kind of moving along to the artwork, my style was a lot more rendered back then, and it was because I was super inspired again by Sergio Topi, fantastic artist, quite inspirational for me, and probably not only me, but just kind of like to tie it into the inking in this particular instance here that I'm doing now. I'm looking to simplify my artwork and the process so that, and this is not lost on me, because I know probably every comic book artist, has to kind of come up with a style that they are, that's, I guess, appealing and marketable, but is also done in a way that it doesn't take too long to create the artwork, just purely from a, what is your style? Is it super detailed? You're the kind of artist that puts a lot of, nonsensical lines in your artwork, or little tick marks and all this stuff. or are you just a little bit are the kind of artist that kind of likes bold strokes, accurate, or well-placed strokes, and you're willing to just kind of like step away once you put something down, ink on the paper, and be a lot more in tune with storytelling as opposed to just drawing. And that's always been, for me as a comic book artist, what I'm striving toward is storytelling, because you obviously don't need to have the most detailed artwork to tell a good story. These aesthetics or these styles in comic book art, everyone's drawn to the kind of style that they're drawn to for whatever reason. And for me, I've always, like growing up, I've always liked the John Byrnes or the Neil Adams, artists who have a slightly within the confines of a comic book, within that genre of comic book that is realistic. And so that's the style that I kind of always aimed for within my own work. And so it's coming from a point from that perspective, discovering Topi kind of allowed me to get pretty wild out there, because his stuff was very much more what I would consider like expressive, or I wouldn't say abstract. It just had a really nice looseness to it, and a dynamicism that just caught my eye. And I discovered Topi, I'm going to say probably in my 40s, because I'm 50 now this year. And I don't think, if I had seen Topi, and if I did, like when I was in my 20s, maybe even 30s, his style would not have appealed to me, because I wasn't, in that art space, if you will. Like everything that I was drawing was trying to be realistic, being fairly representational. And so where I'm going with all this is like that process is definitely a journey where I'm learning now that I'm definitely going to be taking different routes along that journey, where there's times where I'm super like engaged within making artwork that's super detailed, and of course sometimes this depends on what I'm drawing or what the project is. And there's times where like I'm really just fascinated by putting down the least amount of brush work or pencil work to get a story told. But at the end of the day, I still have to be with me. I still have to like what I'm doing and be interested by what I'm drawing. And so that process it's changed. It goes along this path, but the path can kind of veer left and right, even though I'm still but I'm still pursuing, the art of comic book storytelling. It just so happens that along the way, I find things that I have an appreciation for in art that I didn't have, and from the onset, or from when I was trying to, be something more like an artist that's trying to be super detailed. And so now with this series where it's at now, if you compare the early artwork, and maybe I'll cut some of that into this video clip here, this take, I should say, you can, it's clear to me the difference. Even now as I'm talking through this, kind of feel like I'm rambling, but I'm just trying to get super, I think, kind of clean artwork, not as detailed. And so my process for that is, again, getting back to the start of the inking, is trying to get the super dark areas in first. If you call it spotting blacks if you want to, because a lot of the form that you see, I think, it's a lot more simplified when you just lay out the dark areas. And so you can kind of already see how something's going to form from a, how shall we say, if you're to look at this image from from afar, how does it read from afar? And I've learned over the years that again, putting in these super bold strokes or patterns in the artwork, even though I'm rendering muscle, like right now I'm rendering abdominal muscles. I'm also trying to think more heavy, more bold. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to see, like in this case here, he's Adon. No, this is Ona. I'm working on his abs, and we're giving him like, a pretty set of killer 6-pack abs here. And once I've laid out and put down what we're seeing here, these initial strokes, how much after that do I really need to render to tell you that, okay, there's his 6-pack of abs? Do I need to really come back in after the fact and then start adding more rendering and scripting and scratching and halftones? I don't know. I mean, part of the creative process is kind of being open to seeing what happens once you do start inking. And for me, the fun does really start when I'm inking, to be quite honest. And I think that's because penciling is so much more, or it can be so much more of like a mind, kind of like that. You really have to plan a lot more in the penciling. And I think that's this, when you plan a lot more, you can probably be a little more, have a little more fun with the inking, or you can be a little bit looser, and not loose in the fact that it's kind of like abstract work, but looser in the application, and a certain, maybe what I'm trying to say is more of a freedom in drawing and being able to kind of move around the pencil artwork, because it's already been kind of figured out. And I know that's not always the case. There's some artists who probably, that I know, that they just scribble stuff and then it can, up to, depending on who the inker is. Like if you look at a lot of some John Buscema's artwork from Marvel, I've seen where literally his pencils are just like round scribbles, storytelling panel to panel, and then the inker comes in and really kind of will delineate everything, or this inker has their own style, and then they bring that, whatever the imagery is, to life, and they shape it with the pencils of Buscema, but then definitely the inker's own style is going to show through. But for me, this, I did a whole video of me time-lapsing this entire double-page spread, but penciling it. But for me, again, the fun comes in these days, trying to see like how minimalist can I be, for the sake of like clarity, but also for the sake of speed, and making the artwork read, look cool and all that stuff, but at the same time getting to a point where I can produce this work a lot faster. To be honest, I think I am pretty fast when I actually sit down and do the work. I think I can be. It's just, I've got a day job, and this is what I'm working on, my hustle, if you will. But it's definitely also my passion. And this is part of the process here. And I think for me, it's kind of been a bit of a longer process, because I don't toil in this stuff day in and day out. Like I said, I work on this when I can. And for those of you who have watching me develop these 4 issues over the last, 4 or 5 years now, which is that's not efficient at all as far as the work. But again, I'm doing my best to create work that is gonna help my series, and just push things, and at the same time allow me to learn my craft as I go along. Like I said, I've been at this for a while. I'm not a pro, although I won't even say I've come close in any way, shape, or form. I made videos about this before. The closest was getting a call from one of the submission editors at Marvel, telling me that I still need to work on this, that, and the other thing, which is fair. To an offer, kind of, I think it's over a year now, of being able to professionally illustrate some trading cards, but that fell through. And so, well, I was super excited for that project. Again, I probably shouldn't even be talking about it. I'm not going to name anything as far as what the project was or who it was for, but it was definitely mainstream, and was bummed out at first, but whatever happens, right? I mean, I can't really. Whatever those gatekeepers, decided at the time when they invited me was like, hey, this is what we want. I was excited for it, but then it took a while for it to come through, and like I said, it fell through. It's cool. I mean, I'm just gonna keep making my art. I mean, I think that's what happened was they saw my original artwork, because I definitely haven't been doing samples. I mean, I've got a few fan arts on my website. If you do go to my website, there's a couple of things there that's Marvel-ish, DC-ish, let's just say. But the overwhelming majority of artwork on there is this stuff that I'm passionate about here. So I think it just goes to show that as long as you can apply your excitement and passion for what you're doing and you're showing progress, I think that speaks to some people. And like the almost 2,000 of you who subscribed, which for me is like totally mind-blowing. Like it took me, I think, 8 years or 9 years to get to 1,000 subscribers, and then just like the last year coming up on like my second 1,000. So anyway, it's little things like that, but it's been a haul. But through it all, I'm just drawing and doing my thing, and just trying to make cool comics, and trying to learn my craft. And trying to, come up with cool ideas and stories, and just putting it out there, because I realize that if I am gonna get exposure, I'm gonna use this free thing, quote unquote free thing called social media to promote my work and get it out there. Because let's face it, like us artists, we're pretty much, most of us, introverts. That's not a hard fast. That's not a 100% truth. I know that. For sure that's not 100% everyone. But for the most part, like, we'd rather be drawing. That's certainly the case with myself here. But although I will say I do have another part of my life that involves dancing. Not that kind of dancing. Swing dancing. But anyway, there's a part of me that definitely enjoys a performance aspect to this, and I kind of pretty much come to realize that if no one ever sees or buys my stuff, if someone does find me working here, and they can, you might subscribe, you might, like, for the one person who actually bought a comic book this year. Oh, there's maybe 2 or 3 of you actually that bought a comic book from my website. Thank you very much. At least this, I'd like to think, plays a part in getting the word out, and can perhaps be somewhat entertaining if you're another artist trying to figure out how to do this stuff. Hey, I'm another one. I'm an indie who's kind of just working to promote my work and do my stuff here, and just see what happens. I have this comment that I made. I made a comment or something. What was it about? I think it was something about like being fearless when creating art. Like, I think right now I've come to a point where like I just want to make the art that I want to do. And I mean, I've been doing that all along, but like I think that being fearless with the creation of whatever it is goes more than beyond like the topic of what you're doing or what you may be writing about or drawing, but just being bold with the artwork and being confident in putting down brushwork, drawing and sketching, that nothing is going to be perfect. Some stuff might come close to what we think is perfect, and a lot of times that's kind of all you need, because you need to, at least from my experience, I need to keep pushing along and making sure that I can get my work out there. Again, just circling back to that idea, got to get the work out there. And on top of getting the work out there, like, got to do the work. There's no work to get out there if you aren't doing the work. I mean, that's like a big, well, duh, but I think another thing is I've learned that trying to make a product as well is a very good motivator. Again, even if you don't plan to take it to market, I think proceeding with a project that can be like finished but not perfect. Another artist has said that. Jake Parker mentioned that, finished, not perfect, or completed, not perfect. I mean, we're always striving for having the perfect artwork, as I mentioned earlier, or being the best we can make it. But it's really more important to complete these projects that we're doing here and get them to a point where you might entertain pushing it beyond just keeping it to yourself. You're not going to sell it. Maybe you're just going to share it and put it online and see what kind of response you get or what feedback you get. You never know. And sometimes these comments, or the feedback you get, might inspire you to do more. I mean, someone might give you shit, let's be honest. But you gotta, I don't know, you just gotta develop thick skin. And that's pretty cliche saying, but there's a reason why it's cliche. It happens a lot, I guess. But, as I ink this page here, I'm feeling confident with how it looks so far. And I'm recording this, I'm literally 26 and 49 seconds of counting into this. And this figure is almost done. It's a larger page. It's a full page, so it's a bigger figure. And so it again, getting back to like the technical aspect, like working with more bolder shapes and strokes in letting the artwork sit. Letting me do the artwork, and I'm sitting here as I'm working on this and thinking like, okay, this is pretty much complete. I don't need to put that much more rendering into it. And that's a huge time saver. It's a huge, let's get this done and let's move on. And again, getting back to the top of the video here, at least while I'm inking this particular part of the drawing here, the 2-page spread, the figure, I'm glad I've gone back. I've transitioned from somewhat of a super detailed approach to when I first did this series to something that's much more I think easier ultimately to render faster, because again, I am trying to make a product here. I'm trying to make a brand with my comic book series here, and my brush point is getting a little kind of the hairs on this thing. It's a synthetic brush, but it is a kick-ass brush, I'll tell you what. Definitely pick up this brush if you can. I've got an Amazon link. I'm going to put one in here, and quite a few people have actually picked this up on my link, which, I don't make much. I might make a quarter off of this if you buy one of these brushes. But again, one of those things, might as well put it out there. But yeah, getting back to the inking on this with this brush, faster, quicker, I think. I'll be totally satisfied if at the end of this video I can truly say, yeah, the inking on this figure is done, and I've done it fearlessly. I've gone in here, rendered it, and put some shadow in here. Render it in a way that I think is going to work, and it's a much simpler style. And drawing with fewer lines may seem like it's easier, but I'll tell you what, in my experience, it's taken a number of years to get to the point where I don't feel like I need to put like a bunch of like line work down, there's going to be points where I'm going to want to cross hatch, but for me, when it comes to like drawing the figure, getting to the point where I can use bold lines to help just render and draw to get a much more bold look, I think has been a process for me of me experimenting, obviously, looking at different artists, obviously, but then also implementing and doing it and not second guessing up to a certain point, and then just saying, let's get this work done. Let's get it completed. Let's just push it out there. You may want to make a comic book, but you definitely won't have a comic book if you're not producing the artwork and getting it out fast enough. Hey, I'm guilty of that. Trying to be better at that for 2025. But do or do not. Anyway, that's so that's kind of like the gist of what this is. It's kind of like I had to sit down here. I had penciled this page a few days ago, and doing work stuff now, and now finding maybe an hour to get this completely, at least the figure done. Again, I outlined at the beginning of this video, or stated that if I can, by the end of this session here, get this pretty much wrapped up, the figure itself, I mean, there's a lot to draw on this page, don't get me wrong, but if I can get this figure completed, I'm gonna feel pretty happy with getting this part of the drawing set up, or finished. Obviously, for me, I usually leave the faces till the very end. It's kind of like I use the drawing portion here of the body to kind of warm up. That's kind of been my ploy here, as I've been jabbering on here while I'm inking. And I'm slowly kind of building up to that point now where I think I'm ready to ink the face, because pretty much that's what's kind of left here. So there's a couple of these bands on his arms here where I will probably enlist the use of one of my other favorite drawing tools, which is the Pitt artist pens. Those are some great pens. I tell you what, they are just, I use them. So if I'm plugging them, it's because I generally do use them. Got a bunch of them here. These Pitt artist pens, love them. Highly recommend them. Get a set if you can. They're kind of like use them and chuck them when they're done. That's pretty much how I treat them. Let's see. So we just got the face to do here. I'm gonna try and lower this a bit, and let's see if we can zoom in here. Drop the board, and the board's just as far as it'll go down low. So let's see here. We got some. So Onu's got this parts of his costume, if you will, parts of his body that I designed here that are like metallic. He's got kind of like this helmet on. That I don't know. The character's kind of. He debuted. He's not one of my original ethereals. He is an ethereal. He debuted back when I was doing my Realm Ethereal calendars. And although I think he originated as just like a pencil drawing in Procreate, and I initially he was just like a grayscale mono, like a Procreate pencil drawing. And then 1 year for my calendar, back when I was still doing it, I said I'm kind of low on characters, because at that point I was doing a lot of these character paintings, as some of you may know. If not, I'll put a link in the description. You can see how a lot of these, in fact, how all of my Realm Ethereal characters were born. They were born of a time when I was like more interested in doing illustration, like digital illustration, and so I dabbled in that for a little bit, just on my own. I never really did anything to kind of pursue that I wanted to be a digital illustrator in the way like I did for comics, where I would submit work. The time when I was submitting artwork was like, this was like in maybe the late 2000s, or late 90s, I should say, mid 90s through the 2000s, and there was a real effort on my part to come up with like sequential artwork that I would send. But with digital art, when I got into it, you already had your art stations, you already had all your different websites where there's already like professionals being published. And so for me, it was really, if I had to go back and look at it all, was my interest in getting back into painting, because prior to all of that stuff, like in high school, like in 92, 93, 94, I was really heavily into oil painting, or at least trying to figure out oil painting and gouache and watercolor and acrylic to a certain degree. And a lot of that, there was no internet back then, not the way it is now. And so there was a time, essentially, just to wrap it up, where I was really so enamored with digital painting, and I still am. And I've said this before, I want to get back into it. It's just my comic book artwork is still my passion, and that's what I love doing. So that's where my focus is. So you see, even I had to have a little diversion into digital painting to for these characters to be born, because without these digital paintings of these characters, when I was wanting to become a digital illustrator, because I was inspired by another artist, a certain artist who came up with these really cool angelic beings, that inspired me to kind of do my own kind of thing. And so that's why these ethereals are kind of what they are. These aren't angels, but I wanted them to be kind of like gods or beings from otherworldly, not human, and that stuff has always fascinated me. After the years of when I finally got over X-Men and stuff, like I was a huge X-Men fan back in the days. John Romita Jr. Was doing an X-Men, or Paul Smith, or Mark Silvestri, or even obviously into the Jim Lee eras in 92, in the 90s. After that phase, I really just got into like fantasy, not sci-fi, but kind of just, I don't know where this is, like sci-fi, not quite sci-fi, but somewhat in that area. Somewhere in between fantasy and science fiction lies my Realm Ethereal, because I'm not going to be drawing spaceships, well, not outright. Well, before I say that, there actually are spaceships in the second arc of this entire series. But once I got into, the fantasy genre and started kind of delving into those themes, I discovered that, I've long since left the whole mutant thing. If I ever followed anything outside of that, like Punisher or things of that nature, it was always because of the artist or the writer. I like my creators who like the work they do, and so I follow them, obviously. But for me, the last few years, it really has been things having to do with cosmic, things having to do, like I said, with a certain, a slightly bent toward fantasy, and then getting back into bringing that into a comic book medium. Many years ago, there was a company that kind of, I don't know, it kind of was in that genre where it was comic books that felt like superheroes, but it had fantasy, and this was a long since gone company, but I thought they were very cool, but I guess they had some other issues. It was CrossGen Comics, and CrossGen Comics had that, as far as a mainstream publisher goes back in the day when they were around, had that feeling of fantasy with some sci-fi thrown in, with the look and feel of modern comics. And when they came onto the scene, they totally had my money. They had my money month in, month out. I remember some of my favorite titles was Mystic, Scion, introduced me to Jim Chung's artwork, of course. And then there was there was Sigil. There was what's the one with Steve Epting as the artist? Crucible or Crux, that was it. Loved his artwork. Steve Epting's one of my favorite artists, I should say. And then of course a whole host of other things that CrossGen I just found to be so entertaining for me. It wasn't everybody's cup of tea. There's still people who, like, to them they're either X-Men or they're Batman or they're Punisher or what have you, and it's all good. whatever you like in comics, just love comics, just love on comics. That's what I say. If something out there is not to your liking, boy, we can go down that road, can't we? But I won't. So yeah, just love comics. I mean, that's what I say. And support and love the comics you like. That's why I do my thing, because I still, I tried my hand at doing fantasy art and like digital illustration and creating one-off pieces, but I discovered that I much more prefer doing comic books and telling stories with panels and all that entails, right? So that's why, one of the reasons I'm here doing this right now, because I enjoy making comics. And I mean, if you're here at my channel, this is why I'm here, loving on making comic books. And right now I think I'm just kind of droning on because I'm almost done with this page. And again, I'm trying to be as bold as I can with this stuff. I'm trying to be fearless, trying to just get the work done, not trying to be too precious with it. Years ago, many years ago, when I was in college, so San Jose State, I'm in California, I was taking a painting class, and I remember I don't remember exactly what I was painting. It was kind of a quasi self-portrait, but I was like putting in so much detail in there, and like it was an oil painting class, and I had this blender brush that I found. In fact, I think it was a blender brush. I'm not sure if it really was. It kind of looked like a makeup brush. It was like a big fat like fob at the end. And I remember just smoothing the hell out of everything that I was doing. The instructor kind of walked up, kind of peered over and looked at it and said, "Why so precious?" And so that's, one of the things I'm trying to get better at with my art is I want to be considerate of what I'm doing with regards to the storytelling, but I'm trying not to be so precious with it. And so, I mean, that's another one of those lessons that you don't, I don't know, I guess people do learn at different rates. I figure it seems to me like I'm learning things later, but at least I'm learning, I think, and I'm continuing to push and move within my passions here of creating comic book artwork. And I think with that, the majority of this figure of Onu is complete. So I'm pretty good to go here. I'm glad that I did this here. It was my plan to try and get this inked all in one shot. And I did it here according to the camera, as I see on the monitor here. It's about 42 and 59 seconds and counting here. So for right now, I'm going to consider this figure done and not overly done. There's areas that don't look good to me. I mean, they aren't perfect. But again, as I zoom in here, like I think that face just has enough character, enough detail to it. And then by the time you print it in a comic book and by the time you add the color, it's going to be what it is. But so far so good. And trekking around here, getting back to a simpler, kind of a somewhat of a cleaner style. Always a work in progress, as we all are. So this is just one more facet. So anyway, thanks for watching this particular inking video on this. If you stuck around all the way through, almost 3/4 of an hour this video. Anyway, at least it wasn't a time lapse. And if you were listening along, I thank you. Yeah, if you want to leave a comment or kind of chime in on anything I mentioned here as I blabbered on as I was inking this, that'd be awesome. Or give it a thumbs up or give it a like. Or if you're so inclined and want to subscribe, hit that subscribe button. And I will catch you in another video. So thanks for watching.